we usually have you on the show on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. And we had somebody write in on Wednesday night with a question, because we ask you guys to do that whenever you have a question. And I talked about it a little bit from my perspective yesterday as a parent, but I really wanted to have your perspective, because I think you see things clearer sometimes about parenting than I do. I think that's an amazing talent that you have, and so I'm always thrilled to have you come in. But anyway, I want to read the question again. My question was, if you could give any advice or techniques to helping my wife keep her cool during the difficult times with our son. Our son is almost 5. He was diagnosed as having autism spectrum disorder. His biggest challenges seem to be speech delay and controlling his excitement in public situations and frustration from not being able to communicate his feelings to us or others, I feel. They go on to say, my wife and son have seemed to hit a wall with each other when they both seem to get aggravated. When this happens, my wife usually calls me in to deal with him, or she loses her temper and doesn't deal with the situation properly and yells at him to take a timeout or etc. With the unnecessary yelling and avoiding the situation by turning it over to me, I feel has been leading to another bigger problem between them. It seems like my son is beginning to lose respect for his mother's authority, which is just leading to a vicious cycle. Your help is greatly appreciated. And so I talked about it a little bit from a parent perspective yesterday. And again, I want to say, and we said this at the top of the show, but I want to remind everybody that it would be so disrespectful if we imagined that just from a paragraph that anyone, myself, and I'm not an expert, and you as a BCBA would understand exactly what's happening, that we never want to be in a position where we're like, well, it's this, because, there's so many different scenarios, and we want to be mindful of the fact that we're not there with you. So,
like, in order to give, to find proper solutions, I would have to go out to these people's home and, walk through their everyday interactions with their kid and observe what's going on with the kid, and also talk to the parent about what's coming up for you right now, what are you feeling, what are you thinking, and once I figure all that stuff out, then I would be able to give specific advice. So we can't give specific advice from just a paragraph, but we can talk about a few general things that might help.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on. I mean, first of all, it looks like this mother is really struggling with an emotional stuff that's going on, and that her interaction with her son are bringing up really strong feelings, and she probably has a whole bunch of very unhelpful patter going on in her head, and perhaps some not very helpful rules that are going on, like I'm not good enough, I'm not doing a good job, and also judgments in relation to her son, like why is he doing this to me? Why does he have to do this every time? Or why can't he just respond to me?
Right.
Why am I so inept and feeling helpless and feeling out of control? And all of those things are probably going on.
And we should say too, and I was saying this yesterday, that there would be nothing shocking about that's not in any way surprising or out of the norm, that, I would think that the vast majority of us have at least a moment where we're thinking some of those
Absolutely,
things.
And that's why I'm commenting on it, because this is the type of stuff that comes up for everybody.
Yes.
That's what our minds do.
Yeah.
They like to generate a constant stream of judgments about ourselves and our situations, and some very unhelpful blabber, for want of a better word, that goes on, and it's very difficult for us to not just take that as truth and react to it.
Right.
So I think that there's that issue, and so finding ways for her to help kind of deal with all of that stuff, emotional stuff that's going on. And then there's the interactions with her son. So let's talk about that a little bit first.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So the kind of ABA practical stuff that she could try and do with her son, and her husband could help her with this. And I think it'd be really helpful to maybe try for her to, if she's able to, avoid negative interactions with her son for a while and go back to spending, perhaps you could schedule some quality time with her son every day where it's just about her and her son having a nice time and interacting without any demands. So there's no expectation, so you're not trying to get out the door to school, or you're not trying to get the dinner ready or anything like that. It's just purely time for you. and your son to play together or do whatever he likes, and there should be a lot of reinforcement going on and just enjoying each other's company. And that way you're kind of pairing yourself with non-demand time with your son, and then you can also start to pay attention to the things that you really value about your son and value about your time with him. So I think that's really, really important. And then going right back to the beginning, we talked about this on Wednesday, this compliance building, and going right back to just interacting with your son, asking him only to do things that you know he's going to do, and then you're able to reinforce him, and then he's able to be successful, and then you're kind of rebuilding your relationship with him. And only having positive interactions.
I think that's so important, Evelyn, and I think you just touched on something that's really important for whoever is doing the main share of the homekeeping, because it's not always the mom in all situations. But I just was having a conversation with somebody the other day about my expectations of parenting and my husband's expectations of parenting, and my husband was terrified. He had never been around kids before, and he was so afraid that he was going to be this dull, too old dad who wasn't going to roll on the floor. And I said, it's exactly the opposite. That he rolls on the floor with my son, and that they have a party, and that I'm the dull disciplinarian parent. And this friend of mine was saying, that's just shocking to me from you, and why is that the case? And I said, well, because I got laundry to do, and I got dishes to do, and that I don't remember to take enough time that where I take demands off of myself and say, no, this is just my time with my son, and there's absolutely nothing that can interrupt it. Nothing in the house. I'm not doing 8 things at once. I'm just being with him. And I think that's a common thing that as caregivers we do.
Absolutely.
And that we could all benefit from that, of saying there's this amount of time, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour a day, that we don't have anything else but interacting with our child.
I mean, I think that applies to any relationship.
Yeah.
You really need to plan that time whenever you're not trying to get stuff done, or you're not playing these different roles. It's just you and your partner, or you and your child, just being with each other. And
or checking email on the phone, right? Isn't that a big thing now? Saying this time, there's absolutely nothing else, including checking, Facebook and internet and things like that.
And the other thing as well is that we kind of get into a rut of only noticing negative things and reacting to them. And so I think spending some time every day and having the space to just practice noticing the good and noticing things that your child does that you really like or appreciate, and like almost making lists of the things that you appreciate. And I actually did this exercise even with myself not that long ago with a partner where I felt very in a rut, and then I just started doing this appreciation kind of work, and it really helps. It really helps to change how you then approach that person. And that's almost like an antecedent kind of modification, because then you're approaching your interactions with the person without already anticipating aggravation, and you aren't carrying around already simmering kind of resentment or anything like that. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what's happening here with this lady and her child, but it's just working on that, noticing the good and the appreciation, and thinking about all the wonderful things about another person really help kind of you approach them in a different way. And I think you gotta start that however you possibly can. There's a lovely quote that my mother used to do about my nephew when he was little, that whenever, because he was a wonderful baby, but you would get to a point where he would be tearing the house apart, and then it would be time for him to go to sleep, and my mother would always say, oh, he was a lovely boy, but his mother never loved him more than when he was asleep. You know what I mean? And it's from some old poem, but even if it's a moment of when your child is asleep, taking a moment and looking at them. It can be very difficult when you first start trying to do that. If you're in this really awful place and you're stuck feeling really terrible and your relationship is really difficult, it can be hard to actually try and find good things. It really can, but you just trying to think of even the smallest things and the littlest things, and if you give yourself a time and to sit and do it every day, it can really be helpful. And then of course if you increase the reinforcement, so if you do see something that your child or your partner or whatever does that you like, reinforcing them for that, and that makes everyone feel good. So increasing the reinforcement in your life is going to make you feel better and all your relationships better. So that's why I think spending that time with your kid, just having kid time and me time, and then also building compliance up. So asking your kid to do something which they're definitely going to do, and then reinforcing them for that.
Yeah.
And then you can gradually build that up and do it as much as possible, and you'll start to feel more confident and better and confident, and like you're giving your child reinforcement, so you feel better about yourself, and then your child's going to cooperate better with you, and you're building that compliance and so on. And pairing yourself with reinforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, even with our programs with our kids, usually when therapists start, they spend a lot of time just playing with the kid.
Yeah.
And we just want the kid to associate them with no demands and lots of fun and reinforcement. And parents don't get the opportunity to do that, really. They're just thrown in the deep end, and you have a life that you have to run.
Right.
But it really works if you approach it that way. So maybe taking it right back, where if it's possible, if dad can be the demand placing person for a while and let mom just do fun stuff and re-establish that trust and that kind of reinforcing relationship with her son, that could really help.
Yeah, and you know, it's important to say too that this could easily be on the other foot. And I think I was saying that in our family, that there have been times when I've been, for lack of a better word, the bad guy that was constantly the disciplinarian, and then the shoe would be on the other foot. And you know, he's home in the morning now with dads, and I'll come home and he's like, wow, you know, dad, this and whatever. And I got, you know, it's a constant balancing act when there's two people who are parenting between who's the bad guy and who's the good guy, but that everybody should take a turn doing discipline, because you get into trouble otherwise. So looking at the balance, and I think that that's a really good tip, Evelyn. Yeah,
and then the other stuff, of course, is dealing with all the stuff that's going on in your head and these difficult emotions, and putting yourself in a place where you're coming to an interaction that might be problematic with your son, and being able to react effectively and you be more effective in your parenting in that moment whenever your kid's doing something that's very provocative to you. So I think in terms of that, we had talked about ACT on the show before, as acceptance commitment therapy, and it's really amazing. And I would recommend that this parent, maybe there's a book by Russ Harris, The Reality Gap, and it's a very easy to read introduction to ACT, but it basically is going to help you identify what the problematic and unhelpful thoughts that you're having, or any rules that you're following about yourself or your child that are not helpful. It's going to take those and give you strategies to be able to distance yourself from them. We had talked about on the show how when you're in a crisis or in a really stressful situation, your vision kind of tunnels, like you're looking down the tube, you know, you're kind of looking through and only seeing this tiny, tiny bit of the picture, and that makes you very ineffective, because you are kind of inflexible and you've only got a few choices of how you're going to respond to that tiny bit of information that's there. Whereas if you can open up and see the entire situation and the bigger picture and stay in contact with kind of what really matters to you, you have a lot more options for how you're going to respond to the situation, if that makes any sense. So what ACT helps you do is kind of open up and be able to look around and kind of give you some distance from those really difficult things that are coming into your head, so you can see more clearly what your options are, and you can detach from those difficult things, and it helps you make room for all those feelings and everything. So you're freeing yourself up to make better parenting choices. And I think if you practice these things enough, these kind of, they call it diffusion, this distancing from your thoughts and your feelings. It's not making them go away. It's like having them there and accepting that they're there, and that's okay. It's just kind of empowering you to act effectively in spite of them. So even though you're having these angry feelings and everything, you can have them and still not react to them.
Right.
You can react to the situation instead of to your feelings.
Not be at the mercy of them.
Exactly. And over time then you'll find that you can kind of put yourself in a better place even before the situation happens, and hopefully then you don't end up in a confrontational situation, or you're able to see the situation clearly and plan better, maybe even like anticipate a problem and problem solve ways to avoid it or to prevent it from happening and so on. So I think that I would highly recommend that she
and it's called again?
The book, it's called The Reality Gap, and it's by Russ Harris. I have given my copy to someone else, because otherwise I would have brought it so you could see the picture of it. You can get it on Amazon.
And again, he is someone who...
He's a specialist in ACT. He is a doctor, and he lives in Australia, and he actually has a child with autism himself.
Right, which is coincidental.
It's coincidental. He was an expert in this field before his child was diagnosed, but it just so happens that his child was diagnosed, and he wrote this book, which is an ACT book, and he talks a lot about his experiences of having a child with autism, and I think that means that it's especially relevant for our
It's
parents.
amazing. Quite a gift
it's a
for
really
us.
wonderful, compassionate book. It's very good about teaching you self-compassion, which I think also is really important, and it's very comforting, I think, to read. So, and it's very easy and very short.
Okay, so really important, and I think it's so important to recognize that I think that all of us at some moment are going to feel overwhelmed on this journey. And, you know, and yet we can all point to a time in our lives when something overwhelming happened, but we felt like we could cope, right? And this whole thing that you've described about getting that tunnel vision, I think it really aptly describes what it's like to find out that your child is diagnosed and to see the kinds of things that you're going to have to be facing, because you do feel like your choices go, okay, we have autism. We're looking through the autism tunnel.
And it's very easy to just see the gap. That is the reality gap. It's like a gaping black hole. And if you're looking down the tunnel, all you can see is the black hole. And so what this book and ACT tries to do is to help you see, yes, that black hole is there, and that's not going away. But look at all this massive stuff all around it. You have this wonderful world that's all around it. So the gap is still there, but it's not. Your world isn't just the gap.
Right. I think that's a really important thing for us to hear, and if we can think back to a time when we did have something that was overwhelming or stressful and that we felt better and were coping, you can imagine that there's a way that you can cope with this as well, and to find that that distance. Again, I love this idea of we're not poo-pooing it, we're not saying it's not there, but finding a way to get to a place where it's not this unrelenting, you know, jackhammer in your head that it's the only thing, to be able to see a bigger picture. It's much more hopeful. So absolutely love it. The Reality Gap by Russ Harris. Okay. You can get that on Amazon. So wonderful, wonderful advice for all of us when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And I also mentioned, too, that I think it's awesome that this dad wrote in. There's a lot that sounds to me, you know, there are good things that are happening, that the dad recognizes it. I also think it's great that the mom has recognized the times when she needed him to step in.
Absolutely, it's very important.
Yeah, that, you know, it's important for us to tag team. And I know some of the things that I was saying yesterday, I'd love your opinion about, that I was saying, you know, for the dad to kind of track, when is this happening? When are we getting to the point where it's overwhelming? Because maybe there's some stuff that he can do beforehand, because as a mom in these situations, you know, I have no idea if there is a pattern to when it happens, but I know for me personally, dinner time is the most stressful time of the day for me. My child is there saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. The sun is setting, so everybody's I swear everybody's a little more on edge during that time of day. My husband has come home and he wants to talk to me and I want to tell him about the day, but my child is there. It's like the noisiest time in the neighborhood. And I got 3 things that I'm cooking, trying to focus on, and really what I would like is 10 minutes of quiet. You know, so I am set up in that moment of the day that if I'm not careful, I could handle things in a way that I don't want to handle them. And there were times along the way when we were doing intensive ABA in the home that was always when the therapists were leaving, you know, so they're trying to have a conversation with me too. So I just felt like I was being pulled apart. And I had to get to the point where I said to my husband, I need, when this happens, for you to take him for a walk. Come home and we'll all sit down and eat dinner. I just need 10 minutes to myself.
Yeah, it's really important definitely to observe and be a behaviour analyst about it and look at what's happening and why it's happening. And then thinking about ways that you can anticipate problems, and so you can kind of manipulate those triggers and so on, and see what you can do about that. But I really do think that it's worth having for this mom to have some time to kind of go backwards and rebuild her relationship with her son without pressure, and not having to put demands that she is immediately feeling stressed about, or ending up getting in a confrontation with her kid, because they've obviously, it seems like they've got into kind of a reciprocal kind of cycle of winding each other up kind of thing for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know what the function is of any of the behaviors, so
but it's easy enough to do.
Seems like a cycle
that you can get into that thing. And I actually think that's great advice for all of us, to find some time in the day when we're not putting demands on the child, where we're just enjoying the child and the child's enjoying us and enjoying that interaction. I think that's really, I want to go home and do that this weekend. And
there's never any harm either in practicing the compliance stuff, like asking your kid to do stuff that you can, that they can be successful at, and you can reinforce them for. That feels good.
Yeah, and you could do that at any age. They could be 3 or 35, and you could be asking them to do that.
And it's reinforcing for, you know, if someone asks me to do something that I know I can do and I do it, it's great. I feel great, they feel great. It's like a really nice way of building relationships with people.
Yeah, and it's a great way of getting out of a rut, too, of where feeling like it's all swimming around the edge of the toilet.
And again, obviously looking for the good, or trying to catch your kid being good, and focusing in on that and reinforcing having an interaction with them in that moment.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all that with us. I hope that that was really helpful for all of us. I got a lot out of that, so thank you for taking the time when we don't normally have you on Fridays.